Welcome to the Cloakroom with Peter Roskam. Former Congressman Peter Roskam leads Baker Hostetler's federal policy team. Through interviews with leading members of Congress, Peter provides an insightful first-hand view into the latest policy and political debates on Capitol Hill. In today's episode, Peter is joined at the 37th Annual Legislative Seminar in Washington by his Baker Hostetler colleague, former Congressman Heath Shuler, and Senator Peter Welch, a Democrat from Vermont. Welch is in his first term in the Senate after serving 8 terms representing Vermont in the House. He serves on the Senate Judiciary Committee, the Commerce Committee, and the Agriculture Committee, where he chairs the Subcommittee on Rural Development and Energy. Welch is a strong advocate for prescription drug affordability, renewable energy production, and rural broadband access. Peter, Heath, and Senator Welch discuss Democrats' agenda if the party gains control of the Senate in the midterm elections. Let's listen in to the Cloakroom with Peter Roskam.
Well, Peter Welch, thank you so much for being here again. And if you guys heard me tell this story last year, Peter and I came in as freshman members together. We were getting to know one another. You start developing these relationships, and Peter asked me one day. He goes, "Hey," and now this is 2007, and he says, "Hey, would you like to go for a run?" So we were in the house gym. I'm thinking, yeah, the next day will be fine. I had a foot injury, and so running long distance wasn't a great. I wasn't encouraged about that. But I'm thinking, Peter's a few years older than I am. This will be fun. We'll enjoy one another. We'll probably walk more than run. That's what I'm thinking. Well, biggest mistake, I'm putting my shoes on, and I look up, and here comes Peter into my section of the locker room, and he's got a marathon T-shirt on. I'm quickly trying to decide, how in the world am I going to get out of this? But then we start running, and Peter's so inquisitive and wants to know about me, and I'm trying to learn more about about his state and community. And about halfway through it, I finally grabbed his arm and I looked at him. I said, "Look, if you don't stop talking and asking me questions, I'll not make it back to the Capitol." Developed a great relationship, and I think there will be many, many people on Capitol Hill will tell you this. If there is one senator or one former House member that just exudes the integrity of what it is to be a statesman and to have character and integrity, it's Peter Welch. He is one of the greatest, nicest members of that entire body. And so welcome.
You wonder why I come back. That was my NFL tryout. When they got my size chart, I got nixed.
Yeah. So let's kind of jump right in. I hate to just kind of bring politics up right out of the gate, but Bernie Sanders is not going to run for president this year. It kind of makes you, let's use a football you are a free agent this year when it comes to that. Tell me about the Democratic Party. Tell me about the bench. Tell me about, I know we're not even through the midterms, and I'm already looking to 28. What does that look like, not only for our country, but what does that look like for you? What are those priorities? What is the perfect candidate look for Peter Welch?
Let me give a little context on that, because right now, as we know, the president's numbers are very, very low. That's from a Democratic perspective, welcome news. But Democratic numbers are pretty bad. So my view is that on our side, all the drama about Trump, people's views about him, those are baked in. And we're not going to win with a candidate who just is reminding people of the things we think are bad about what's happened with Trump. And I believe that there has to be an aspirational component to whoever is going to be a successful candidate for us. And that aspirational component always has to include a growth in the economy. It has to be a commitment to solving problems. And, the biggest thing, I think it has to be giving people a sense that we care about having policies that make it possible for folks back home to build their communities. What I'm sensing so much is that all this social media stuff, all the conflict we have in politics, all the partisanship, all the arbitrariness, it's really unraveling that sense that people I think we all need a feeling connected and feeling at the end of the day, the work we do, we don't mind hard work, right? People work hard. That's what they do. But they want some assurance that at the end of the month, they're going to be a half a step ahead, not necessarily 2 steps back. So there's got to be some capacity for unifying on what I believe are American values about a commitment to not just their family, but to the well-being of the community they're in. And I mean, think about the work that all of you do for your various clients or enterprises. You're advocating for the policies, but embedded in it is a culture in a lot of these businesses that is about the well-being of their employees. It's about the well-being of their community, and it's about sustainability. So that's not about arbitrary values. That's about shared values. And we're losing that, especially with the way we have such a transactional notion of politics right now, which is radically different from what we had when I was serving with Peter back in the days of Heath and me. So that's kind of an aspirational element that I think we're gonna need to be successful with whoever that candidate is. And keep in mind, I don't know who it is, because to some extent, we didn't know who Bill Clinton was until he was Bill Clinton. He came out of nowhere. We had no idea who Barack Obama was until suddenly he was Barack Obama. But they had a capacity to connect, and that's why I want us to have an open primary. But I think somebody who has those qualities and can display them on the campaign trail, where it's not just about trashing Trump, but it's about the aspirational element that I think is so essential for us in political life, and I think it's all essential for all of us in whatever it is we do.
Can you be a voice of reason? Kind of, if you look at some of the candidates that we've had, it's been more to the left, and it happens in very swing districts or swing states, that those more moderate candidates that can kind of get to the independent voter or more moderate Republicans to vote. Is there a way to kind of craft or be a leader in that side from you to say, hey, look, it's great. Well, you may win the primary, but you're gonna lose the general election and get more of that moderate side of what Bill Clinton was.
But let me describe what is moderate. Okay, I actually get nervous at that term in some ways, because it's not just a split the difference thing, right? Mm-hmm. You can have intensity, energy, conviction, passion when you're moderate. Moderate to me means that you're willing to listen to the other side. Moderate to me means you've got some humility, that you've got a firm conviction, a firm point of view, but you actually have enough humility to know you're not necessarily always right. And also, what it also means to me is that you appreciate that working hard to include others whose points of view are somewhat different, if you can agree that you're making that half step forward, that is worth doing. It's not my way or the highway, okay? And Peter, you were a fantastic legislator that way, and you too, Heath. So, so that's the thing about it. And also moderate means that you're understanding that you've got to take into account that you represent everybody. I've never had a primary, or I shouldn't say that. We have a single district, so I've never had to be dealing with the effects of radical gerrymandering, which I think is really destructive. So I've always felt this obligation to represent the people that didn't vote for me as much as the people who did vote for me. And that's not to say I agree with them, but on the other hand, I have as much obligation to listen to them, be respectful, to try to take into account their legitimate points of view, as I do to the folks who elected me.
A few years ago, I was watching you on C-SPAN, and it was like let's join Peter Welch in a town hall meeting. And it was great because it was not like just a love fest. There were people that were getting up and they were critiquing you, and you didn't take the bait, and you're very gracious. And I think part of a gift and an advantage that you have is you're an honest critique of you're able to offer honest critique of your own side, which I always found to be interesting. And so on toward that end, where do you think, I know looking at the Democratic Party today from the outside, it seems like all of the energy is on the progressive side. It is intense. It is frustrated, and it has, and it's aggressive. And those are not, none of those are bad adjectives, by the way. That, that politics welcomes that. At the same time, there's like the pragmatic side that says, okay, well, that's great that you're intense and all those things. You've also got to win an election. We've also got to govern. Walk through kind of what it would be like. So let's assume, for the sake of argument, but that both chambers flip and Donald Trump's in the White House. How does that manifest itself? And let's take something specific like IRA credits, the energy credits, and that the Trump administration has just gone hammer and tongs against coming out of the IRA, slow walking the permitting. Really quite aggressive. That's something that you've been active in the past, know a lot about, care a lot about. Can you fashion, or can you contemplate like an area where you could say, I think we can work with these guys over this? Or would you get eaten alive by the left if you even articulate that?
I would not get eaten alive. I mean, I want to say there's two parts to my answer to you, Peter, to a very good question. Number one, if you're in office, your obligation is to try to have public policy that is beneficial to folks back home, and to be able to do the jobs that they're doing with good policy rather than impediments. Okay. And another point that this is the heartbreak for me right now in my job. We're arguing about a lot of things, but Congress is totally failing to come close to addressing a lot of these affordability issues. And the challenges that people face in my district, Vermont, voted big for Democratic, but they're no different than Idaho or Indiana. And folks are dealing with housing. They're dealing with the cost of healthcare. They're really freaked out about social media and what that does to their kids. They're worried about the impact of the One Big Beautiful Bill on their community hospitals that are such important institutions. So, when you and I talk, a lot of times the topic wouldn't be, who's on first and how we're going to get one another. We'd be talking about some of these practical things that are challenges in your district and mine. And so the challenges that are out there are shared. They're bipartisan challenges. And this is the heartbreak for me. Why don't we talk about those challenges that are shared? Because that inevitably leads to a conversation about a shared solution. Okay. And that's what's not happening. That's where I believe the Congress is failing. And, Trump's not making it easy. All right. And we've gone into something that I think is really dangerous with so much of an orientation towards transactional things as opposed to shared values. But the other thing that's really harmful now, this partisan gerrymandering is a race to the bottom. I mean, and this every 2-year redistricting now that we're in is a race to the bottom. In my view, the Republicans and Democrats should do mutually assured destruction here if we keep this up. We ought to both renounce and disarm on that, because what you're seeing is something that's profoundly cynical, and that's the politicians trying to pick their voters instead of the voters picking their leaders, and it's just going to do no good for anybody. And it intensifies that issue, Peter, that you're talking about, because these districts, then the primary is the election that the members have to win. The general's foregone because it's been written for the Republican or Democratic side. So that's a structural issue. And the fact that we've adopted this and we're doing redistricting in the middle of the decade, it started in Texas and then went to California and then to Cascade, fighting fire with fire. But it's so destructive for the well-being of our democracy. And to have representatives who actually have to listen to and get along with people in their district that they didn't necessarily vote for them.
I was interested. I sent you a text last year when Elizabeth and I were doing an end-to-end hike in Vermont, and I never thought about sort of that comparison.
This guy's in shape.
I'd never thought about that comparison to other parts of the country, but it was rural. We're walking by places that were in some cases absolutely fabulous and glorious, in some cases struggling, like for sure struggling. And that common thread is really, really interesting. Are you I feels like all I do is watch you on TV, but I don't. But I was watching as you were doing your oversight role, and without a doubt, your close questioning of Secretary Nome led to her, being forced out within a couple of days, and she brought in her own controversy. I'm not asking you to comment on that. What's your view on the role of oversight and how it can manifest on both sides? Because what it's easier to do oversight on the other party. It's less comfortable to do oversight on your own party. Where do you think, what's the future of oversight?
Well, it's combat politics right now, more than anything else, and I don't think that's particularly helpful. I mean, my view would be if we had some balance, Congress would be much more permissive in terms of delegation of authority and latitude, but very, very demanding on oversight in terms of, did you follow what you were supposed to do, as opposed to micromanaging. Okay, you've got to have some. In what I see with oversight now, it's the only tool the minority has but it's really used to try to tear down whoever is before us, as opposed to get to the heart of a matter. And also, we're finding enormous resistance from this administration. It's probably been something that's been a progressive resistance from the executive. I read something that the Reagan administration put out when he first went in, and it was a beautiful statement about the co-equal branches of government, and he would provide whatever information the Congress is entitled to. Those days don't exist anymore. So, I do think that ideally oversight is on substance. Is the program that has been implemented, is it working? Okay. And that's the bigger question. And along the way, there may be some issues of fraud where there is misconduct. And I actually think that's where the Justice Department should be in, and people should be held accountable. But I do think what's happened is that oversight has got too much of the gotcha in it, as opposed to what's the underlying public policy that we're trying to achieve with the program. And just as in the enterprises where you work or you represent, you've got to give some latitude to your managers and your staff to make reasonable judgments in carrying out the assigned responsibility, and have some respect for that. And they're not going to all work out. But on the other hand, if they're just messing up and not doing the job, there's got to be that oversight in that review.
You've rolled your sleeves up on some of the permitting reform stuff in the past.
We have got to have permitting reform.
All right. So let me ask you this. We had Kevin Kramer was here about an hour ago, and he was very upbeat about the possibility. He's a savvy operator. He's not naive, and he understands the way of the world. And he was because we were pressing him a little bit on, look, permitting reform has to include discussions around renewables, et cetera. And he, he was like, he could get there. And I don't think it was like just for the benefit of the audience. He had concerns about some of the socialized cost of transmission lines and maybe too ambitious. And there were some no-goes for him. But what's your sense? And he was describing, and the more I think about it, the more I think he's right. He's describing an inevitability to this. In other words, the energy demand is cresting and accelerating at such a breathtaking rate,
right,
that we have got to figure this out. And the dam, he didn't say this, I think this is but the dam's going to break. And so why not figure it out and be smart about it? As a man of the left, what would be helpful, do you think, moving forward? Is it just more pressure that's got to come? Is this a timing thing?
No, there's
politics.
I think there's two things. One, politically, Democrats have traditionally been against permit reform because they've used the permit system to oppose fossil fuel projects that they were against. Okay, so going to a place where we realize that to get the clean energy projects that we do favor, we actually have to build things and get them done. That means I want and we have some debate within the Democratic side. I want us to be able to get to yes or no sooner rather than later, and without immense expense. Now and also I have confidence that if you have a permit reform system that works and it's fair and it's on the level, and obviously there'll be some fossil fuel projects that are among those that get considered, as well as clean energy projects, I believe that then the market, where clean energy projects are actually much cheaper in terms of the energy cost, that our net carbon emissions are going to come down substantially if we have the capacity to permit much more quickly. So I come from a point of view that tells me that my goal of a cleaner environment, cleaner fuels, will be achieved with a permit reform, even though it might be some fossil fuel projects that I may or I may not personally like. So that's one. But second, we've got this elaborate system. It's sort of like our healthcare system in a way. It's been created over 100 years, right? And you've got all these various jurisdictions. And within these jurisdictions, there is an incumbent bias towards protecting that system. And permit reform is going to require disruption of some of those arrangements. And I do believe you say inevitability, but it's got to be done sooner rather than later, because the demand for electricity we all know is going up. And our capacity to be able to provide the electrons that we need in the internet economy is essential to our competitiveness and well-being. And of course, as you know, China has made a decision about electrification. They're going all in, and they are able to do these big wind projects from 2,000 miles away and get the electricity to Beijing. So we're going to be at a real competitive disadvantage if we don't do it. But I think the Democrats are coming around to being aggressively in favor of having a rational permit reform system.
Where does nuclear fall in that category? Where does nuclear fall?
We'd support nuclear. I mean, there's a waste issue there, but I think you're seeing a nuclear, especially this concept of small nuclear, that is definitely part of what could be the future.
I think it's interesting when you're describing that permitting process and sort of the niche regulators and so forth. It reminds me of a friend of mine who was he was a kicker for the Chicago Bears, and he kicked a game-winning field goal. He tells the story of being out to dinner with the team, and he's looking for some extra butter for his baked potato. And all the people around the table, the waitress comes around and everybody says, "Hey, you know who this is? This is Bob Thomas. He just won the game. It was like an unbelievable thing." And she said, "You know who I am? I'm the person with the butter."
That's right. That's pretty good. And that's the person you needed at the moment.
There's an underlying in every regulated entity here today. Everybody who's dealing with whatever it happens to be has a story of a regulator that has been overwrought or overcharacterized or unfair and so forth. And you run into this all the time. Is part of permitting reform rolling those people? Number one. And then the second thing is there's a danger if somebody reaches out to you, some Vermont business, they reach out to you and you ask them to run interference, and you appropriately run interference with an agency. Well, then the agency downstream, somebody's like, "Oh, you think you're going to reach out to the senator and put me on the spot? This is what I'm going to do to you." And it's all passive aggressive, and it's very, very difficult to deal with. And you can't even do anything about it, because the more you think you're helping, the more you're making their life miserable. So how do you create a permitting reform regime that makes sense, where people go, "Okay, these are the rules and this is how we're going"?
Well, I mean, this is why this is a shared problem, right? Going back to what I was saying before. I mean, you can be a clean energy utility or person, you can be a fossil fuel person, but do you want to waste all your money on delay, right? You want to get a yes or no, you want to get it sooner rather than later. And what helps with the bipartisanship is that, let's say I'm supporting a permit reform. There'll be people, and this has happened to me in Vermont, where we've got very much clean energy orientation. People will get mad at me because I'm going to let they'll be fearful that I'm letting some, quote, bad projects forward. If I'm doing that and I've got some bipartisan support, including some other Democrats, in the bipartisanship, it's a signal that something's on the level here, as opposed to just the partisan approach to things. That's absolutely number one. Number two, I mean, I talk a lot about this at home. I was with the Shelburne Select Board the other day, and they want to do a bike path. We love bike paths in Vermont, right? And the bike path has a categorical exemption from having to go through NEPA. You know what that is, right? Except in order to prove that you're qualified for the categorical exemption, the way it works for us now, you got to go through NEPA. So a bike path costs...
Oh, that's so good.
You know, it's like you want to pound your head.
So good.
So, you know, like a bike path for me is like, you know, like 3 feet wide, and, you know, Heath getting out of my way when I'm riding my bike down the dirt path.
Yeah.
So, but that's an example of how overwrought it gets. And we just got to be absolutely, I think, result oriented. And saying result oriented doesn't mean you bypass legitimate environmental and safety concerns. It just means you do it sooner rather than later, and you don't create a process that allows for endless delay, because it's like $2 million a mile to build a bike path. That makes no sense. So, you know, being assertive about that as a Democrat, and, you know, one of our leaders on this is Sheldon Whitehouse, who's really one of the most prominent environmentalists in the country, and Martin Heinrich. The two of them are, you know, very, very solid 100% environmentalists, but they get it. Now, one of the impediments here that's really broken trust is that we had all these projects that major companies invested in, offshore wind projects, that have just been categorically written off. And that's outrageous. I mean, because that's the arbitrariness, where you actually go through the whole process. You spend all of that money, you get the approval, and then there's an arbitrary decision. No, your project's not going to go. And that would be as true if it were fossil or if it were a wind project. And that has been, in all candor, an impediment to the progress on the negotiations that Sheldon and Martin have been engaged with.
Well, Senator Welch, thank you. Look at your watch. We're getting you out of here on time. So when your staff gets an invitation next year, they'll go, you know what? Those guys, they moved the product. We get the funds back.
That. Right. I want to know how many people are applying for some of that $1.776 billion relief fund.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter, Heath, and Senator Welch. If you have any questions for Peter, his full contact information is in the show notes. As always, thanks for listening to Baker Hosts and the Cloakroom with Peter Roskam. Comments heard on Baker Hosts are for informational purposes and should not be construed as legal advice regarding any specific facts or circumstances. Listeners should not act upon the information provided on Baker Hosts without first consulting with the lawyer directly. The opinions expressed on Baker Hosts are those of participants appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect those of the firm. For more information about our practices and experience, please visit bakerlaw.com.